few folks in the room with us today, and then quite a few people joining on Zoom. Thank you. And we usually just get started with round robin updates. So I'll call different names and you can introduce yourself and give the group any updates on what you're working on. And also if you have things you're excited to learn about today or questions for the group, you can let us know then too. Okay, so I'll start on Zoom. I see Kelly. Let's see
Hi,
if we
can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yeah,
Oh, great, because my computer's not working, so I had to call in.
perfect. How's it going?
Good, how are
Kelly, you want
you?
to give a quick introduction and let us know what you're up to these days?
Sure, sure. We have been working hard on Mount Jackson Ridge as well as the Rionito project, trying to keep our crews moving up there. And the rains put us at a little bit of a standstill here, but we are hopeful that things will dry out and we can continue working. We've also been getting ready for the holidays and trying to wrap up as many projects as we can right now. We just did a huge defensible space project up at Oddfellows, which is exciting to see so much coming out of the forest, not just leaving it there, but we're pulling it out of the forest, bringing it down to our meadow so we can burn it at another time. And as far as business and Oddfellows, everybody's doing well and staying healthy, so I hope everybody else is.
That's great to hear.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that.
Okay, let's see. What about in the room? Well, we have someone over here in the yellow jacket. Do you want to give an introduction or you don't have to, we can skip you.
I don't really have anything to say. I just wanted to,
Thanks for joining us. Great.
Whereabouts are you from?
on the Cray Ridge,
Okay, good. And your name again?
Donna Forbes.
Okay, nice to see that.
Thanks for joining us. And then what about you? Do you want to give a little
Sure.
introduction? Okay.
Yeah, my name is Lima. I'm not officially part of the working group, but
Everybody's a part of it.
like I said, I'm part of the work too. I work with Ag Innovations, which is a nonprofit that's been around for 20 years. We work in projects related to natural resource management, so groundwater sustainability, watersheds, also forest health, fire resilience, food and ag food systems and ag. And currently we're working in on a project up in Lake Sonoma to develop a community-driven watershed plan for the Lake Sonoma. And it's through a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation, also with support from the PG&E Foundation, and we're working with a couple of the local tribes, the Northern Fire District, Sonoma Water, and a few, a number of different local landowners and residents as well, and CBI, WRA, number of different groups. And the plan is to develop a watershed plan by 2027 that really reflects community priorities and landowners' priorities. And forest health and wildfire resilience, it's one of the top priorities. So I'm curious to learn more and if there's any information that may be relevant to them, then report back as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Yeah. Thanks for coming. All right, we'll jump over to Zoom. What about, I see someone from Pacific Watershed Associates.
That's me. Hello, everybody. I'm Shannon Weiss with Pacific Watershed Associates. And for those who don't know who PWA is, we specialize in forest and ranch roads, upgrading, decommissioning, and just overall improving forest and ranch roads. So we work all over California. And so I just pulled up my current project list to look at what projects I have going on currently in Sonoma County. And let's see, I have projects in Sheep House Creek on a private property. We have work with Sonoma County Regional Parks on a variety of their properties. I have a new project I'm developing with Monica at the Ag and Open Space District on their Saddle Mountain property. And the Laufenberg Ranch with Sonoma Land Trust. The list goes on here. We also do trainings and workshops for folks for best management practices for forest and ranch roads. We just recently did one down in Aurora Grande with the SRF folks. I also have some active projects on Fitch Mountain with the city of Healdsburg. And that looks like all I have for active projects in Sonoma County. We just wrapped up some projects with land paths at Rydell. I think that's the current list. So I haven't been to one of these meetings in quite a while, and I just wanted to touch base and see what's going on with the group and just re-engage with you guys and sit in.
Great, thanks for coming. It sounds like you're super busy. Sonoma County. Worked on a lot.
I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name.
Shannon.
Shannon, okay, thanks, Shannon.
Let's see, let's go back into the room, and Christopher, do you wanna give us a little update about what you got going on?
Good morning, everyone. Well, nice to see you all. I see some new faces, so I guess I'll repeat some of the things I say each meeting. One is I'm a landowner in Occidental with a 50-acre conservation easement and been doing forestry management watershed work there. About to launch in a couple weeks with Brock Dolman some fuels to flow work in the upper watershed tributaries of Dutchville Creek. Basically gully stuffing for you, like a simpler name than Fuels to Flow campaign. So that's the latest. We just wrapped up 4 years of forestry work there. And so we've got a lot of burn piles that we'll be doing in the winter with cooperative extension and circuit riders. Separate from that, I'm working with Safer West County and Boho Collaborative, Bohemian Collaborative. And there's lots going on there, but you may see the newsletters that come out of Safer West County, so you're familiar with some of that work going on. Lately working with Bodega Land Trust on their almost 200-acre conservation easement on the Tannery Creek Reserve in Occidental. And working with Patty, who I see is joining us today. And we're involved with the designing and facilitation of a community engagement process with the adjoining neighborhoods of Taylor Lane, Joy Road, and all that, butting up on there. That's probably enough. Thanks.
Great, you're so busy too. Okay, we'll go back out to Zoom, and we already heard from Kelly. Kai, you're gonna be presenting in a little bit, but do you wanna just give a little update on how you're doing?
Sure. I'm Kai Hennepin. I'm the Regional Resilience Manager at Pepperwood. I'll be talking a little bit about wildlife monitoring on the preserve. We have a ton of fuels reduction projects that Devin Friedfeld, who I believe usually joins these meetings, we had a big burn earlier this month, and just always kind of lots of projects on the bill.
Great, it's good to hear you all have some projects going on, lots of burning. We'll stay on Zoom, and how about Jason Mills?
Hi, Rose. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we've been doing a mix of things as usual. We've been doing some educational trainings and partnerships with CCNB. Oh, I should start with Jason Mills from Ecological Solutions. So we did a cool collaboration with Conservation Corps North Bay and Santa Rosa JC, and I did a week-long fire resiliency course for the Corps members there, and we had about 30 students at their construction training facility out of Petaluma. And it was pretty cool because we did everything from practices and principles of defensible space to design and implementation, hardscaping, softscaping, all that good stuff. So I think they came away with a good perspective on how to make a difference around your structures. And then I did a training for all the supervisors from San Rafael and Santa Rosa. And on that one, I really just wanted to get across native trees So we did a native tree treasure hunt, and we're able to find about 14 species of native trees with the supervisor. So that was a fun exercise. And then right now, my team's actually in the thick of a 15-acre broom project in the headwaters of Mill Creek. So I rolled down the hill for the meeting, and it is just going really well. We found all sorts of stuff hiding under the broom, including Pacific giant salamanders and a bunch of different mushroom species now. So it's been a fun project. But yeah, it's broom season, so we're going at it and looking forward to the meeting.
Great, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you could make it. And we have so many folks on Zoom, so I'll just keep calling names. There's one that shows up next on my screen, F. Molinar. I don't know if you're here and want to give an update. But maybe you're just listening. That's okay too. What about John? Okay, maybe another listener. John, can you hear us?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So my wife
That's
and I
okay.
own a small piece of property outside Occidental, and she saw the notice on this meeting. So we zoomed into it to see if we could learn anything. We pull a lot of Scotch broom. We had several years ago, we had about 3 acres masticated, and nobody told us that it would come up Scotch broom. And we spent 40 hours the first year pulling 3 acres of Scotch broom. And it's a continuous battle. Since we have our shaded fuel break where we were masticated, every year we spend, I don't know, 10 or 20 hours pulling Scotch broom. So that's all. We're just trying to see if we can learn something.
Well, I'm so glad that you're joining us today, and that you heard about the meeting. And I'm sure you'll learn something. We have a lot of good experts who are going to talk today. Next on the screen, I see Jill Butler.
Good morning, Jill Butler, representing Wallala River Watershed Council. And our big news is that we found some young coho on a tributary to the North Fork. So, yeah, so that's exciting. First sighting of coho in the watershed since 2004. And Fish and Game has come out and confirmed that sighting and took samples to see if they can determine where the parents came from. Apparently, if they're hatchery fish, they'll be able to tell exactly which hatchery, and if they're wild fish, then I don't think they will know. But anyways, we're in that process, and hopefully that's a good omen for the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is we also had a presentation from the State Water Board, and I'm a little hazy on the details of this, but it relates to the issue in the upper Russian River that was in the papers a lot a couple of years ago. You know, that there was more demand for water than the available supply, and they started the water rights people started requiring monthly reports from people with water rights. And that agency has developed a model for determining the amount of water supply, which they seem to be calling the supply and demand model. So it turns out they didn't just do the Russian River, they did about a dozen North Coast rivers, and one is the Gualala. And their draft report for that is out, and they're taking public comments till December. And so I guess, you know, if anybody's interested, they should look into that. And I can see Shannon on the Zoom, and Shannon, maybe you know more about that program than I know virtually nothing, but that it's happening and it's coming to the goal. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you for sharing. If you do want to chime in, Shannon, feel free. But we can look that up and find a link hopefully to that public comment. And I could share it in the chat if I find it.
And I have that link. If
okay.
wants it.
Great.
I'll just chime in to say hi, Jill. But PWA doesn't have any affiliation or direct contact with that. We've been kept separate from that matter, so I don't really have any details to share with the group today. But thanks for asking and saying hi, Jill.
Perfect. And Jill, if you want to share the link in the chat of the Zoom meeting, that'd be great. And then
Will do.
Oh, thank you. And then what about Bryn Miller? How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. On the SEC end, I see Lauren Clausen is on, so I'll defer to her to talk about most SEC things. But one quick update. We just spoke with Sonoma Valley Fire District and Fire Forward yesterday, and we're planning a hopeful burn on our conservation easement up at Van Hoosier for next fall. So really excited about that. And again, I think Lauren can speak to some of the other work that our restoration crew is doing.
Great, super exciting. Okay, well, and Lauren is next on my screen too. So do you want to just piggyback off of that?
Perfect. Yeah. Lauren from SEC. I manage the restoration program over there. And just a couple of the main projects we're working on. We are wrapping up some invasive species removal, mostly broom pulling, with an ag and open space grant that is expiring next month, veg management grant that's expiring next month. So our crew is out doing that right now. We're also starting doing some pile burning. We were burning piles out at Montini Preserve in Sonoma the last week or so. And then just a smattering of miscellaneous landowner projects. And one other thing that I wanted to mention to this group, although I don't have a ton of information yet, is that we've been in contact with a couple folks at CAL FIRE that are doing research and in conversation about the emerging pest Mediterranean oak borer. So I'm meeting with them next week, and they are, I don't have the name in front of me. Oh, actually I do. The chair of the California Oak Mortality Task Force. So I'm meeting with him and one of his colleagues. And it definitely sounds like they are welcoming any involvement in understanding and documenting and managing this pest. So I will have more hopefully next month or in January.
Great, that's super important work, and thank you for looking into that and letting us know. Let's see, how about Patty Aaron? How are you doing?
Good, thank you, Rose. Hi, I'm Patty Aaron. I'm with the Sonoma RCD. We're always busy with lots of technical assistance. One of the primary things that folks are working on are getting the contracts in place for the North Bay Forest Improvement Program from batch 7. And that is ongoing, but I think they're almost done. And then also with Goldridge, we're going to be hosting application clinics in January, and that information will be coming out soon. I also part of my job is supporting the Good Fire Alliance, and they are having a holiday open house on December 10th at 5 p.m. at the Sonoma Land Trust, and everybody is invited. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks for sharing. Okay, and then next on my screen on Zoom is Bianca. How are you doing, and do you have any updates to share?
Hi, sorry I came in late. No, there's no updates.
Okay, perfect. All right, maybe we'll pop back into the room. And Kim, do you want to give an update intro?
Yeah, sure. My name is Kim Batchelder. I work with Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. I'm the Vegetation Management Coordinator. actually a double agent working with the county and their the PG&E settlement funds, as well as coordinating work with the RCDs on a lot of the wildfire resilience programs. Not a huge amount of information out right now. We're gearing up for a funding cycle that's going to be based on the various workshops that we hosted over the last 2 years. Projects have been in the works, and we're being able to provide some funding for those projects that we'll take to the board next month or in January. So that's going to be fun to get those rolling. And then, yeah, I think that's about it for today.
Lovely, thank you. All right, we got a few more folks on Zoom, so how about Sheila Murphy?
Hi, everyone. Apologize, my video isn't working today for some reason. I am just crashing the meeting to listen to the wildlife presentation. I work for Sonoma County Regional Parks as the wildlife management lead. So thank you for letting me be here.
Great, thanks for joining us. And then what about Monona? Oh,
I had to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Hi,
No
everyone.
worries.
I'm Monona Haviland at Sonoma County Regional Parks, and I lead up our restoration, habitat enhancement, and wildlife program. Although Sheila Murphy, as you just is really is a technical lead on our wildlife program, and our colleague forwarded that you were going to get a presentation from Pepperwood on the wildlife monitoring you all are doing there. So excited to see that that presentation. We also do a lot of vegetation management, broom removal. We have some broom removal at Taylor Mountain that we're going to be doing later this year. And we also are doing a lot of process-based restoration with learning from Brock Dolman's experience at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and trying to combine, integrate our watershed restoration with our vegetation management. And yeah, so I'll stop there. We have lots going on at regional parks and partner with a lot of you all, and excited to hear some of the presentations.
Great, thank you for joining us today. I think we have one more person on Zoom. Fred, do you want to give us a little update?
Hey there, I'm calling from the streets of Occidental and happy to be checking in. Mainly, I'm doing about 6 management plans right now, and so I'm listening carefully to what everybody has to say about invasive species and burning, and really keen on today's presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks for joining us. And then there is one phone call-in number, but I think maybe that's Kelly. Okay, great. Oh, and Will Spangler just joined us. He's going to be giving a presentation in a little bit, so I'll let you wait to check in during your presentation. And then here in the room, Adriana, do you want to give us a little update?
Sure, I'm Adriana Stagnero. I work for Woodridge RCD with Rose and partner frequently with Kim. And yeah, a couple of updates from our end. I wanted to say Christopher will be working with Christopher on the Tannery Creek Reserve, kind of the management plan, community engagement process there. So looking forward to that. And we have several projects kind of going on. I think our one main focus that we're working on now is engaging with different communities who are located along pod lines. CAL FIRE has identified these potential operational delineation lines. They're mostly roads, main roads, but also sometimes non-road ridge lines. And these are important for containing wildfire. And so we know that a lot of private landowners live along those lines, those roads, and in order to improve the evacuation and kind of resilience of those roads, we need to work with multiple private landowners. So we're going to be engaging communities soon on that work. So if you're in West County and you live along a one of those lines, which I believe you do, Coleman Valley Road, we'll be in touch and feel free to reach out to me. Some other things like Patty mentioned, we have the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. That is a cost share style program for forest landers who would like to do forest improvements. We've got a round of applications opening up in January. So like Patty said, stay in touch with us if you're interested in participating. We'll also have a application clinic in early January, a few of them, so people can sign up for that. We'll send out more information. And I'm also looking forward to hearing today's speakers talk about broom removal and wildlife.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and I'll let that just kind of be Goldridge's update, and we can move over to the first presentation that we have. So Kai Penifin, who's the Regional Climate Resilience Manager at Pepperwood Preserve, is going to talk to us about their wildlife monitoring program. So I'll let you take it away.
All right, first we'll see if the screen share, the slide up.
Yeah.
Can you see it? Okay. Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. Devin Friedfeld usually joins these meetings and wasn't able to, so I'm stepping in for him at this time just to talk about our wildlife monitoring work. As you mentioned, I'm the Regional Resilience Manager at Pepperwood. I primarily focus my work on climate and wildlife resilience, but I also work really closely with the wildlife monitoring program because oftentimes wildfire corridors and climate refugia are also in the same places where wildlife are moving. So any area where there's dense vegetation often gives wildlife critical cover so they can move and so they can den and kind of ensure their survival. So we, placing cameras in these locations can really pick up a lot about their movement and sometimes something about their behavior as well. And this is a fun little picture of a playful moment that a cub is having that we've captured on one of our cameras. So I thought I'd put it here today. So some of you know who we are, but for those who don't, let's see if we can get this to advance. There we go. Pepperwood is a 3,200 acre preserve. We're located on the east side of Sonoma County at the southern end of the Mayacamas Range. Our landscape is dominated by oak woodlands and grasslands. We do a fair amount of prescribed burning, as many of you know. And of course, as much of the North Bay has also experienced wildfire, so have we. The property burned entirely in the 2017 Tubbs fire, and then we burned partially in the 2019 Kincaid. So we had some wildlife monitoring sites up, as well as forest monitoring sites up and instrumentation before the fire, so before 2017. But after the fire really kind of accelerated all of our monitoring programs around post-fire recovery, specifically looking at changes to the vegetation. And of course, habitat for wildlife was part of that as well. So today we really have a really large and diverse monitoring network on the system on the preserve, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. So on the left-hand side, you can see a map of the preserve, and you can see all these different features and icons. And we'll talk a little bit about most of these. So this is what monitoring looks like across the preserve. So there's a lot of research going on, a lot of monitoring. We do a lot of collaborations. So it's become a really kind of a great place for folks to try things out and pilot innovations in monitoring. And we can talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, you could see the footprint of the two fires and the impact it's had on the preserve. So back to the map on the right-hand side, the red circles are the Wildlife Picture Index sites. So if you know about this, this started in 2012. We have 20 cameras across the preserve in a 1 kilometer grid. These run year round. There's motion activated cameras at each of these locations. We also have 20 cameras on a property north of us at Modini. So that's the full network. I'm just going to focus on what's on the preserve today. We are the first wildlife picture grid in North America. And since it's begun, we've collected over 9 million photos. So a huge amount of data. Then you can see the crow icons on transects across the preserve. This is our breeding bird survey. This has been going on since 2004, so it's a really long-term data set. We have volunteers that come out and they survey the birds 3 times during the breeding season. This really gives us that long-term record of biodiversity, biodiversity and abundance. The blue triangles, which are super easy to see, there's one here and one here. These are our weather stations. These have been up since 2010. We have some additional weather stations that are paired with some for other sites. They collect data every 15 minutes on precipitation and temperature, humidity, and wind. And then the green triangles that are throughout, or actually they're red, are part of our forest plot network, which this came as part of the post-fire recovery response. We had some early vegetation monitoring sites that were set up by UC Berkeley. So we have some pre-fire data on vegetation, and then post-fire, we really amped that up and put 15 additional sites throughout the property that also have weather stations associated with them and cover boards, and then wildlife cameras. And they're sort of set up very much along the CDFW protocols for these sites. And so those have become kind of the data set that we compare the pre and post for a number of our projects. So both looking at vegetation as well as wildlife, so the responsive wildlife. We are part of the Sentinel Site for Nature Network, so we're one of the sites across the state of California monitoring long-term data sets. So that's been a great way to contribute to kind of the broader research that's going on throughout the state. And like I said, we're pretty uniquely situated here in this area because of the 2 fires and kind of the impacts that have happened and all the monitoring that's gone on during that time. So really, with all that in place, we're monitoring all this data. And there's all sorts of instruments going on here, including weirs, flux towers, fog collectors. We're really monitoring a wide range of things related to climate, to hydrology, also vegetation and soil moisture. That's what these soil moisture probes are here in this transect. And it really gives us a comprehensive picture of the ecosystem over time. But one of the main things that I'm going to talk about today is the wildlife monitoring. So this is some pictures from our cameras. This is the wildlife picture index grid, both at Pepperwood and Modini. This is our wildlife specialist, Stephen Hamrich, that many of you might know, maintaining one of the cameras. So he does this year round, checking the cameras. He goes out and he checks for battery life. He checks for, swapping out the SD cards, and also clearing vegetation. So if something falls in front of the camera or during the springtime, when the grasses grow high, he has to go out there and mow and get the that down, because the cameras will basically keep taking pictures each time the wind blows and the grass hits those motion detectors. So that's a lot of work, and we definitely are trying to figure out some ways to manage this. And I'll get into some more details in a minute. So we also, we do the annual monitoring of wildlife with our cameras, but we also do some seasonal camera site locations because we know there's certain places maybe that we want to capture some wildlife. For example, in August and September, we place a camera near our weir that's on the east side of the preserve, because we know that the bears often visit there, because that's like the last place on the preserve that actually has some water during that dry period. So we get some good pictures of the bears doing a little swim there, as you can see, which is pretty fun. So where we place the cameras really affects what you get to detect. This map is showing our 20 camera array and the detections that we collected in the spring of 2016. The circles indicate where the cameras are located. The size of the circles, the larger circles are cameras that have high detection rates. They have lots of pictures. The smaller ones have less. And sort of what's unique here is we have this ridge line running down north-south across the preserve that you can see kind of in this picture, this map here. It's really mostly grassland, so we tend to capture a lot of herbivores on our cameras, including mule deer, of course. And then on the far north end down here of the preserve, pretty quiet area of the preserve. There's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of access or roads versus down here where our Dwight Center and Visiting Scholar Center buildings are. We have lots of activity down here with humans, but not so much here. And there we're seeing herbivores and carnivores like bobcats and gray foxes, so a little quieter for them there. And on the east and west side of the preserve, down the canyons into the drainages, where a lot of the forested areas are, we see, of course, herbivores and mesocarnivores, as well as some of those top predators like the puma and the bear. So the picture that we had of the bear and the weir is actually down here at D5, close to that one. So now I'll talk a little bit about the installation of cameras. So we actually just use a basic Bushnell trail camera that's mounted on a post or a piece of a stake like this, about knee height. We visit the cameras historically about 6 to 8 weeks between the visits. This is a really staff intensive effort that happens. So we're playing with ideas about how to maybe reduce the resolution of the images, not so much that we would lose the ability to see what's in the picture, but just to give us more space on the SD card so we don't have to go out as often. So we're sort of prototyping going between 9 and 12 weeks and see how that goes. We're also looking into potentially using the cellular Bushnell cameras, which would just tell us, you know, when something was offline or that needs maintenance. So trying to figure out how to reduce the actual human effort to go out there. Some of these sites are pretty deep in the forest and difficult to get to. So it's one thing we're trying out. Sometimes wildlife gets super curious, like this bear decided to have a little snack and chew on the camera. So that either means they have to be replaced or just repaired in some way. So it does take a fair amount of effort. So we also do monitoring of small mammals and reptiles. And the way we do that is we are prototyping this, this protocol, this referred to as a drift net. This protocol was designed by CDFW. They put these in place for their cannabis program. So Lindsay Rich and Justin Brigier, created this protocol. So on the far end at this brown box that you see, there's a camera inside of there, and it has a 40 centimeter focal length that's set up. And the mesh fencing basically directs the critters to the box. So if they start to go the other direction, you see that turnaround that will turn them around and bring them back to the box as they run along that fencing. And then once they go across the threshold into the box, there's a little trigger that will tell the camera to take the pictures. And then once the picture is taken, then you see this little gap here is where the critter crawls out the other side. So in addition to this visual monitoring, we also do a lot of listening using acoustic devices to monitor both the bats and the birds. We're in the process of testing 2 types of audio detectors. One's called an audio moth, which is a low cost, it's under $100 device. That's the one that you see in the picture. And then another one called the mini bat, which is a much more expensive, I think it's closer to $1,000 device. And we're comparing them to see if the audio moth performs well enough that it's capturing all the species that the mini bat is. And it looks like it actually does. So we have some, we'll probably publish a paper about that here soon. So for the birds, we deploy the audio moths for 7 consecutive days between April and September. And for the bats, we run them for 4 consecutive nights during that same period. And what we've discovered is just kind of cool. We thought we had 4 bats on the preserve before we did this process. And then actually we discovered that we have 14 species of bats. So we were super excited to find that out. We're also doing some piloting of detection technology. So like when the critter goes into that box, that drift net box, there's different ways to try to tell the camera to take the picture. So we have a couple different pilot projects going on. One is using a Reconyx camera and an infrared trigger so that it really captures a heat signature in order to tell the camera to take the picture. This is great for like small mammals and birds. One of the challenges is it's not great about picking up reptiles or amphibians. And so we are also trying out this HALT camera, which has a laser beam essentially. And when the critter goes through the laser beam, it triggers the camera to go off. And so that works better for things that don't have heat signatures. So that's sort of what we're testing, as well as the audio moth versus the mini bat. And the idea is that if we are able to test these things out and see how effective these lower cost monitoring systems are, then more folks will have access to that. We can maybe duplicate that in other places. And so part of that is our partnership with the Sentinel Society for Nature, figuring out a standard across the state that would be cost effective and effective. One of the other things that we're involved with that the Parks Department that's here today will know about is, of course, the bear scat collection effort with the North Bay Bear Collaborative. This is, of course, a regional partnership. So each summer and fall, typically from July to October, we're out collecting bear scat, or rather Stephen is leading this effort primarily. Our staff can join when we want, but it is a lot of physical field work in a hot period of time. So freshness is key when collecting scat for genetic analysis. We stop when the rains begin because it affects the quality of the sample. We collect scat on the partners' properties. We also do opportunistic scat collection. So if somebody, if a landowner calls us up and says, I have a bear scat to collect, we will send a team member out to collect that and include that in the analysis. And so all of these samples get sent in for genetic analysis, and we send it to Ben Sachs' lab at UC Davis to analyze all the data, and then it comes back to Stephen, and then it gets shared with all the partners in the North Bay Bear Collaborative. And so each of the bears gets an ID so that you can track it through time. And then we've been able to do some early analysis with some modeling tools around family groups and distinguishing bears that are related versus bears that are unrelated individuals. And so that's been interesting. We don't have results yet. We hope to share those soon. So all of this really contributes to this really incredible long-term wildlife and climate and vegetation data sets that we can apply to all sorts of projects. So over time, we've built this, like I said, this really long-term set of data to support different research questions that we might have, or our partners might have, or our visiting scholars. We could study how wildlife responds to wildfire, how species shift with climate change and how animals interact with development and roads, so collisions and things like that, and other impacts. This kind of long-term monitoring is essential for understanding the resilience of the area, and really is helping us even with guiding our management decisions as the environment changes rapidly. So that's my presentation for today. I'll take questions if folks have them.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. I have a question about what's in the upper left picture?
That's a bobcat.
Bobcat doing.
There's a little baby here. Playing, essentially.
Got it. That's hysterical. I love that.
Yeah, so we get some funny pictures. We get the owls, that wander into the view of the camera and get a picture taken. And so we have lots of fun photos of wildlife.
That's an incredibly complex monitoring system. How many staff members do you think are involved in all of that?
Our research team, which makes up all the monitoring, there's 5 of us. So it is a lot of effort and a lot of work. We're trying to find ways to streamline that process, either by using, the radio. We have a radio relay system that brings a lot of that data into a central database. We're trying to figure that out for the wildlife camera images, except we have to actually go out and get the SD cards because there's no way to transfer the images. And then we're also using a lot of AI models to test out how to catalog the images too, because that's a huge factor. So we've been using Wildlife Insights for our wildlife camera data and testing that out to see if they have an AI that will at least tell you like, oh, it's a blank, or there's actually something here to catalog, which has reduced the amount of effort. We do have volunteers from the JC who come and do our cataloging for us as part of the conservation science internship and some other groups.
That's it. Thank you.
I guess I have a question about, so Kai, you said that some of the things that you're doing are totally new, first time that it's been done in North America. That was the photo grid, or I forget what you called it.
The WPI.
And then there are some things that seem maybe like they've been used for a while. Are there other reserves that are doing similar things that you kind of model after, or how do you sort of determine what you want to do at Pepperwood?
Well, I think that the WPI, I was not around when it was set up. It was part of a funded project, and that was a first for that particular project. And then the forest plots were put in as part of another funded project from CDFW because they were interested in pre and post fire. And then now we're part of the Sentinel Site for Nature. So a number of the partners who are interested in the drift net fence, how does it work? We've become a pilot site for them to test that out and kind of do a little in-field research around new protocols. So I think it just really comes down to, funded projects kind of kick it off, or partnerships and interests with other agencies that might bring, some idea to us. And then I'm sure there's a lot of other places that this is also done. It's nice for us in the network because we are a private conservation property that we can be a little more flexible. So we don't have as much red tape as maybe a state agency or some, where they have to do more paperwork and bureaucracy.
Jason?
Hi, Kai. Great presentation. That was super, super informative. I'm interested on, Pepperwood is this really amazing nature preserve that's doing land use practices and monitoring wildlife. Have you worked with like Devin and the team who's out and Michael out doing these prescribed fires and such? And have you seen like correlations between wildlife behavior and land use practices, prescribed fire with birds and or amphibians and such? And if so, can you explain some of that?
Yeah, so the research team works very, very closely with the land management team. So we're very small, so we get to talk a lot. And there is a lot of sensitivity on the land management side about if we have research projects or if one of our research team members says, like, I'm concerned about, a nest and they will avoid that. So we do actually coordinate quite closely and have a lot of conversations about the impacts. We can see certain things on the cameras from just even the wildfires around how species were, moving away from the flames before the cameras, were destroyed by the fire. But we were able to recover some of that. So it is we have lots of conversations with each other. We do a lot of back and forth about where fire is going to be put on the land and at what time. If it's a breeding season, it gets avoided. If there's some sensitive, like if there is a den or something like that, they will avoid, doing any kind of work there. And so, yeah, we work pretty closely with each other.
Thanks so much. It would be so cool to have like an optimal window for vegetation management to benefit wildlife, right? If we could somehow pin that down. Anyways.
Interesting enough, we had a grass fire or a grassland fire maybe a year or two ago, and one of the things that Devin had seen was that a lot of predators came in after the fire to eat some of the things that didn't make it out of the flames way. So, cooked snakes and things like that. So there is sort of this relationship that happens post fire where some species can get out of the way and some species can't. And there's other things that come in and benefit from that. So They got barbecued snake that day.
All right. Thanks again.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering if you saw a significant difference between the impacts of the Tubbs fire, which was really heavily wind-driven, versus the Kincaid, which had a little bit more of a natural fire trajectory, is that it was less wind-driven. That's my assumption, but I'm wondering if you saw anything across the preserve to kind of indicate a different sense of behavior, fire behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't unfortunately been able to process a lot of the data that we have. We have all these data sets and we'd like to, really pin more of that down. Anecdotally, I think I've heard, really seen how the deer were shifting ahead of the fire and things like that just by the cameras. Same thing with the bears. Tubbs, just moved so quickly. I think everything was just running as quickly as it could to get out of the way. Where we did see, because the north end of our property got hit by Kincaid, they kind of moved, lots of species moved south and sort of went to the forested areas that were sort of more, they're wetter. Again, down by that weir.
Yeah.
Cooler areas, yeah.
Good. Well, a question on the bat, like that's so interesting. You expected maybe 4 bats and encountered 14. Is that a pattern you're seeing with your other partner sites, or like is it with more intensive monitoring? How often is it good news like that you find more than you might expect?
I don't know about the other, we just started with the Sentinel site for nature and we're testing out these audio moths. I mean, it was a big shock to everybody that was like, for such a long time, we just thought we had 4 bats, and to find out you had 14 was kind of amazing. And I guess, a species like a bat species are not necessarily as obviously identifiable all the time. the audio. So I imagine once they get to the bird data, we might also learn more about how many birds or maybe different kinds of birds we have. So it's kind of the fun part of all of this is like you get to learn something that you maybe had no idea before without having the monitoring out there.
Definitely. And I think a lot of private landowners would be interested to have that same experience, learning more about the wildlife on their property. Could you summarize what you think are the tools that are most accessible and easy to use for just everyday private forest landowners?
I think for landowners, definitely having the really inexpensive trail cams, out, they do a good job of capturing all sorts of activity that you maybe didn't know was there. And I know a lot of landowners do that just for their own interest. That of course would be a really inexpensive way. The audio moths are inexpensive, but getting those processed is challenging. So, if there's landowners that are interested, we'd be happy to talk to them about, maybe ways we can make that more accessible through some of the programs that we have. But yeah, I think that the trail cams, and those are also they're fun to look at. So.
That's great. I remember there was like a bird like listening program out there that anyone can pick up. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Point Blue
Yeah.
did a whole thing on our forest in OAC.
Okay.
And they just set up sound equipment for 2 years in a row, collected all that data, and just recently released all the different bird species that they recorded.
Oh, cool.
So they're a great source around the audio side of birds. They've been doing it all over Sonoma County, as I understand.
I don't remember if it was Point Blue, if it was another service, but there was something that you could just order, and then it would send you a little device that you could hook up to a tree, leave it there for a few nights, and then send it back to them, and then they would decode it. I can't remember what that was, but I remember it was like kind of a thing during the pandemic, I believe, and then no, I don't remember what it is, but we can look into it and send it around. You'll find it.
I think that was Peloton, wasn't it? Well, Kai, thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing all that Pepperwood's doing. It's super incredible. You guys are a great institution, providing great information to all landowners and people who are managing similar landscapes. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is here in the room. We're going to talk a bit about Broom, and I know we're all at least a little bit familiar with Broom, but this time of year with the rain coming, the soil's getting a little softer and it's time to start pulling it. So we wanted to just kind of bring the conversation back around. So first, Will Spangler is going to give us a little presentation, and then afterwards we'll have a lot of time to discuss, so answer questions, and also have a few other folks who are joining us kind of share their experiences out in the field with broom removal. But yeah, first we'll hear from Will Spangler, who's my colleague at the Goldridge RCD, and I can pull up your presentation here and share my screen. See.
Hey, Christopher, can you pass the mic over? Sure. No, sorry. No, don't mess with the words.
All right, and then I'm gonna go into presentation mode. Okay, is that showing up? Everything you want to do?
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be joining this group and happy to share sort of my thoughts around broom management. And exactly as you said, Rose, there's a wealth of knowledge and experience in this room and on the call and out there in the world. So this is just one little piece of it. Hopefully it's a useful structure. So next slide. I'm just gonna sort of structure this briefly. I'll give a little bit about my background. What are the brooms we're talking about? What is broom? And some relevant features of its ecology, why they might matter to forest health and wildfire management and all those things. And then some different management strategies to think about what to do about broom, and then specific tools and link to other resources. So I'm Will Spangler. I'm a conservation project manager at Goldridge RCD, and I've spent my career in the environmental field, particularly focused on ecological restoration. But I like to say, there's that phrase like you cut your teeth. I like cut my cheek pulling broom. I was seasonal for American County Parks and Open Space and did a lot of broom pulling, like 18, 19 years old. And one time hit myself in the face with a weed wrench and got a tiny little scar there, but it's just this nice thing reminder of cut my teeth pulling broom. So I think a lot of people have experience like that as you're getting out. Feel that this is, it kind of fights back. And one thing I just want to sort of lead with this thought. Throughout my career, I've noticed like invasive plants in general, which the brooms, often like these shiny objects. If you go somewhere or you own a property or you're doing a project, you notice the invasives. And they seem like they're this thing you got to take care of before you can get on with the rest of the work. And I think it's important to note that they're like a step on the way to restoring habitat values and functions. They're not necessarily a goal in and of itself. Like to just manage invasives, you're kind of just back where you started. Maybe not. That's okay. Not like systems and things, but just trying to keep framing invasive species control as like one piece of a puzzle. And there's maybe it's important to think of all the components that go into ecological restoration, of which invasives control is just one part. And so to me, that sort of strikes some optimism because there's a lot of, it's easy to get negative, particularly with brooms. So the next slide. So what are brooms? Say brooms. All brooms that we're going to talk about they're in the pea family, they're legumes. They're generally native to Europe or Northern Africa, and they're all generally invasive in California. There's a common name for a native broom, deerweed, but we don't really think of that when you hear people talking about brooms. And what unifies all the brooms is they generally have showy yellow flowers that look like pea flowers, this like banner and keel structure. And in general, they're all unpalatable to wildlife and to livestock. So in contrast to like Kai's talk, the brooms are probably not going to attract the wildlife that they're seeing in their monitoring networks. So I'll spend a little bit of time, or actually just need to go back to that same slide. So I think this is maybe familiar with most people, but I just put like a quick little list of some of the brooms we encounter here. So the most common one in Sonoma County, I think hands down, is French broom. And that's a drawing of it there on the left. It's ranked as highly invasive. It has sort of like, you can sort of see the fuzziness of the hairs on its leaves. Its leaves are in threes. Its stems can be green, but are often brown, particularly the older stems, and it sort of will often look bushy when you see it as you drive by or something. Scotch broom, in contrast, is a little more wiry. It's a little more like harsh looking maybe, and all of its stems are green, and they're ridged if you feel them up close. So that's kind of like between French and Scotch broom. Like Scotch broom is just a little like harsher and has these green stems. And really similar to Scotch broom is Spanish broom, which is generally larger, sparser with its leaves. I think the leaves are not in three; they're really just singular, but it has round stems and really big flowers. So it's just like, think of it as like a larger Scotch broom. Portuguese broom is not really widespread in Sonoma County, but it is in Marin. It is around. We may see it more, and it's similar to Spanish broom, but has hairy seeds. And then one that's not called, it's not another common name of a broom, but I like to lump it with these as gorse. This is generally on the coast. You see this like around Bodega, bright yellow flowers as you're driving by certain times a year. And the thing to know about it is it's just really spiny. You don't want to walk through this or hand pull it without gloves on. And if you ever watch golf on TV, sometimes if they strike the ball into the weeds on the side of the green, they'll say, "Oh, it's off in the gorse." So, kind of knows where it comes from. Slide. So a few things to know. We could go on and on about broom ecology, but I think just a few things to note for folks encountering it, working with it, is that the flowering period is generally pretty long. It'll flower starting in the winter, like pretty soon. Because warm weather too after the rain. Like you can start to see it flowering in the next few months, and it'll flower all the way into the summer. And while it's in flower, parts of the plant can already be producing seeds. So you could have like a plant that's in flower that already has seed on it. I think that's important to note when you're thinking about timing for controlling weeds. Brooms generally tolerate a wide range of conditions with shade, so like from pretty deeply shaded to full sun, and they can tolerate like pretty dry sites as well as wetter sites. And I think the thing to drive home is they thrive on edges. So along road shoulders, between oak woodland and grassland, these sort of transition zones and these ecological edges that are super ecologically rich places and also important for human environments, are where you often will see it. And likewise, those edges are often disturbed, the edges of disturbance, so they do well on disturbed sites. It's how it's the vehicle why they arrive is usually with that disturbance, but then they also fix their own nitrogen so they can colonize disturbed, really nutrient poor sites, sort of take care of themselves. Again, so the negativity of all these things, they grow rapidly, they put out a ton of seeds, they can put out seeds when they're in flower. The seeds they put out can persist in the soil and be viable for many, many, many years. So it's sort of like once you pull it, or once it's gone, it's not necessarily gone. The seed bank can still be there. Those seeds germinate readily with rain, also after fires, if the intensity of the fire. And then any part of the plant pretty much can resprout if you cut it. So it's really trying to grow here. It does well in so many sites. So that's great to know about brooms, but why do they matter? And is this picture familiar to anyone who's driven on Bohemian Highway or other roads in Canada? Yeah, it's hard to sort of see, but in the shade on the left is a big patch of broom, that uniform height green thing under that. There's like one tree, but just this dense monoculture of French broom lining the roadside. You know, this is the place where fire ignitions would be really likely to start and just immediately get into this sort of mid-story dry shrub that could carry it into the canopy and the overstory. It's sort of unsightly. Maybe it's bad for cyclists on the side of the road. It's just, yeah, it can infest these roads. That's like, I think, how a lot of people notice it or come to think about why it matters. And then there's a whole bunch of words here too. It's like other reasons why it might matter. So in brooms, wherever they become established, they really alter the structure of the plant community. So by being this robust shrub, they alter grasslands to be woodier. They alter forest lands to have a different kind of understory. And in general, they just reduce habitat quality for wildlife pretty extensively. We mentioned they fix nitrogen, so they start this cascading effect where the presence of broom displaces natives and then encourages more weedy species that then thrive on that more nitrogen-rich environment. So it's sort of this like cascading effect. We sort of already talked about it, but yeah, that ladder effect of the fuels. So they thriving in edges and then being sort of a mid-story shrub, they can take fire that's moving across the ground up into canopies. They can proliferate really well after a fire or after other disturbances. So it's sort of like some other issue may happen with a given site, and then you end up with also a broom problem. So it's sort of like an add-on. And then a lot of the things we do to manage wildfire, manage land, can actually promote broom. So it's sort of this, we kind of get stuck with it that way. So whether that's building a road or maintaining a road, that creates that edge effect that give a path for broom to grow and spread, or doing like shaded field break treatments. This can be sort of a nasty side effect sometimes. You can create a shaded field break and end up with a broom understory and reloading the fuel break and then the fuel you meant to break. So, and then once you have broom, because they're they can be so persistent, it becomes something costly to manage. I'd argue those are reasons why matter to manage. So we're given all that, right? And then there's a lot of them out in the landscape, like what to do about them. And I like to think of this from a strategic point of view, and then like tools being more tactical, right? Like what are ways we can manage broom without just spending a whole bunch of time and energy and being back where we started. So the first one is prevent their spread. It's that old, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure thing. The best we can do is keep it out of your site or where you're working in your property. And if you already have it, that's a different story. But so this is where decontamination, so not driving around in the mud, cleaning your tires of vehicles, cleaning equipment. If you're coming from a place where there's a lot of broom, really try not to bring soil, mud, seeds with you to your next site. Start at your clean sites and work towards your dirty ones. If you're driving along road shoulders infested with it, maybe try to those bumper strips or cattle grates are good for this, but shake those weeds off your car tires and things like that when you go up your driveway. Any variety of ways to get there. There's a whole wealth of information on decontamination, best management practices. And not only will this protect you from broom, it'll protect you from other things too. So I think preventing the spread, this is where it's really worth it. You know you're doing a shaded field break project, think, how can I keep broom out of my new project site? Another thing you can do that's sort of related to that to prepare is think about the niche or the part of the ecosystem that brooms occupy and encourage those beneficial species to occupy those instead. So this is like, if you're doing a planting project, plant native shrubs that might compete well with it. Talk on and on about that, but just really try to think about what could grow there instead of the broom and encourage that might provide better functions and values for what your goals are. And then if you are in the position of treating it, really think about the timing of when you do it and really trying to limit that seed production so you kind of can stay ahead of its establishment. When you're doing treatment or any other activities, think about how you can minimize soil disturbance, because it thrives on that disturbance. And then know that whatever treatment you do, you should plan on doing repeat treatments. Don't just do a one and done type of thing. And be prepared for monitoring over the long term if you really want to knock it back. And I know I may be going wrong here, but no, that's right there. Yeah. So then, that was sort of strategies. Then there's a whole range of specific tools, and again, I think there's a lot of wisdom among this group. And we're really fortunate to live in Sonoma County where there's a lot of experience with treating these. So I'll talk a bit about that, but this is not nearly the extent of the options for tools, but sort of broadly categorizing these as like a common tool for treating broom is to pull it, whether that's by hand with as much energy as you're willing to throw at it, or I like to do that with a weed wrench. I brought ours, just a big piece of metal, and there's a few producers of these. Mine is actually not decontaminated, so I'm not doing what I'm preaching. But it's a great tool to get a little extra leverage, and this can go around and play with that to pull the larger stems of larger broom. And it's nice because it does sort of focus your soil disturbance really around the base of the root instead of like digging up. And it's less back breaking potentially. And I'd say the big thing for pulling is just try to do this when the ground is soft. Do this, starting about now, but like this is a wintertime, springtime activity. And the more you can pull before there's seeds on those plants, the less you're likely to spread those seeds. So that's not a good one, but know that if you're pulling it, you're pulling something out of the ground, expect there to be regrowth in those places because you're disturbing the soil. So there's some advantages to not pulling it and to try things like cutting, which again, it resprouts vigorously. So if you're kind of setting yourself down a path where you're going to be committed, if you cut it once, you should be ready to cut it again. And generally cutting in the springtime or as you go in towards summer, where its resources are, you're trying to intercept the plant resources to reduce the amount that it resprouts. But know that if you cut it, you should probably cut it again, and doing that over the dry season where it's less likely to survive your cutting is a good approach. And what a lot of people do for large infestations is apply herbicide immediately after they cut it as a cut stump treatment. And that's a way to use a higher concentration but lower quantity of herbicide, but you need to do that soon after you cut it. And that gets us into our next point, which is herbicide is a common tool, but it's not a tool that's available everywhere. Like neighboring counties, there's agencies that don't have this in their toolbox. And there's a whole set of arguments for that, but I would argue that a qualified professional using best management practices to do a foliar spray of herbicide like on the leaves can be a really effective tool to knock it back. And I think a big thing to keep in mind there is, again, back to that strategy of compete with it, outcompete it. If you can, is you're using herbicide, really try to keep that focused on the broom and not on the background vegetation. That's going to do a really good job for you of competing with the resprouts. Some other tools, you hear people talk about flaming broom. Is anyone in this? Is anyone in the room? Flamed weeds?
I think some people might have. Yeah.
It's a cool thing. I don't think of it as so different than using herbicide, right? Propane is an explosive thing that can kill you. It's not necessarily that much safer. And you really, with this, you really need to get the timing. You need to do it like in this photo when the seedlings are really small. You can just start to identify them. And you also don't want to start a fire when you're using a propane torch in wildlands. But yeah, flaming those young resprouts maybe after you've done some cutting and pulling can be a handy tool. Broadcast burning, right? That question will come up. And again, there's people who can speak to this a lot better than I. There are, I think, ways you can try to get a really hot fire going that you not only kill the above ground biomass, but actually kill the seed bank of broom if you have a site that's so infested and doesn't have a lot of natives they're trying to protect. But in generally, burning is probably going to just yield a problem where you get a flush of seedlings following that burn. So it's be careful with using broadcast burning as a strategy. And then there's records that goats will eat it. And again, maybe people have experience with that, but my understanding is you really need to confine the goats on it and train them to eat it. Maybe by the time you go through that effort, you might as well pull or repeatedly cut that patch. But it is a tool. Goats will eat it. It's mildly toxic to other livestock, but goats can build a tolerance for it. I like to highlight the Can't Make or Groom the Broom days. I mentioned maybe this group's talked about this too, where they sort of try to make it a community event. Pull some broom, bring it down to the firehouse, we'll bag it for you, sort of make this like a fun thing instead of an aggravating thing. Broom is good for this. There's a lot of value in collaborative effort. So that's a good tool to use when going after it. And then just a note that when you dispose of it, if there's seeds on the plant, you should manage those seeds. So whether that's bagging it and putting this in the landfill, not in your compost bin at home or anything like that. Or take that material and put it in a really shady site, on a north facing slope under a bunch of tree canopy where it's really not likely to grow. That's an option too, but you end up with a lot of biomass sometimes, so dealing with it becomes an issue. And I want to point the way, like again, folks here, there's lots of folks in the county to talk to, and just a few resources. So I'd actually start at the bottom of the newly emerging Sonoma weed management area. Will be a great resource, and there's a new website for that and a good forum to talk with other folks working on this topic, find contractors and things like that. And then there's two books. I meant to bring the Weed Control in the Natural Areas of the Western US. That's a really great resource for any number of invasive weeds. It has these like data sheets, weed reports, a couple pages long. Goes into detail about herbicide, but also other approaches. So that's a good starting place for research. And then the Weed Workers Handbook, again, I meant to bring my copy, but it's like a little mini binder, and it's really oriented towards folks like us who are doing the work and can be a handy resource, and it's free online as well. Yeah, happy to take questions, happy to be a resource going forward, and always interested in learning more and seeing what other people are up to. I should also add, I lived in Santa Cruz for a number of years, and there's a person down there, Ken Moore, who's made it his life work to go after broom. He does these really great talks where he brings every tool he's ever used to after broom. He talks about the number of times he'll recut versus the amount of shade. He's just like this wealth of knowledge, and folks have worked with him. There are people out there who have made this their life's focus. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate that. What has been the most appropriate time to do herbicide treatments?
Depends a little bit on the herbicide and that cut stem versus broadcast or foliar spraying. I think other people might have more on that. What I have sprayed in the late spring, early summer, where it's really visible, it's flowering, but doesn't have seeds yet.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things you want to get it when they're actively growing. So maybe even a little earlier than that. It might be late winter, early spring. It's probably better.
Nice.
But it's going to depend a little. Roundup is commonly used, but there's other tools, especially because this so readily sprouts from seed bank. This is the type of weed people consider using those sort of longer term, the soil residual herbicides, if you will, right. To kind of get. You don't have a lot of natives you're trying to protect. Yeah, they're really trying to get a longer term protection. So those might have different time. We worked a lot of those on Broom.
Okay. Good. Jill, do you have a question?
No, I do. And I apologize if you said this and I missed it. So is that once Broom is showing up after work on the property, we think it's that the seed is coming in on the equipment rather than um, the soil disturbance stimulated an existing seed bank?
Is that, so that is a question you're saying you didn't have Broom before and you did some work on your property, now you see it? Is that?
Yes.
So yes, it could be that it just came in with the equipment and the folks who were doing that work. But it also, as I mentioned, has a really long-lived seed bank. There's people working with Broom who say any seed that's ever, like, it's only been in California maybe 100 and some years, and they think any of that seed that's ever been here can still germinate. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's studies that like 17 years later, an individual seed can still germinate. So it's possible that there was Broom at your property. It's hard. I guess I wouldn't play the game of pointing fingers necessarily, but it's possible that that was just in the seed bank for some time, and you just hadn't seen it previously, and then that little bit of disturbance or whatever it was could have caused it to germinate. But so it could be that way, but yeah, generally point the finger at, we move a lot of things around when we move equipment, and we step around places, walk in the mud, and so it's an easy one to move, because it's often along roads and trails and places we otherwise frequent also, so. Yeah, it's a good pathway to address, but not necessarily the only way that it can get to your property.
Thank you.
Let's see, we also have, I know that I talked to Jason and Greg a little bit beforehand, that if you could join us and talk about what your experience is working on Broom and with your crews and kind of the methods you use. So, Jason, maybe you want to go ahead if you want to share that with us.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Will. What a great presentation. I've given my fair share of Broom presentations, and you really covered a lot of the bases. Thanks so much. We need so much more Broom awareness, because after doing this work for like 2 decades, I've just seen so many wasted resources from bad practices, right? And we have to make sure all of our resources are being put to best use to maximize every dollar. So the things that kind of I feel like are most important are addressing like where these populations are coming from, right? Because if we don't address the source of the population and we're addressing everything downstream from it, since the broom seed travels hydraulically, we're basically just spinning wheels, right? So that's one thing I think is really critical is where is the broom coming from, right? And it's hard if it's moving down roadsides, but oftentimes you can find the highest population in the watershed and try to address it there before you do efforts downstream. Other ways that I've kind of seen like I guess lessons learned are people putting a lot of money into mowing broom, right? And just seeing so much broom mowed growing back causes a lot of people to give up, or at that point, then start dousing it with chemicals. Um, I believe once you introduce chemicals, there should be an end point, right? If the broom's just raining down from the top of the hill and you're just continually using chemicals and continually mowing, you're kind of just polluting the watershed at that point. So I think communities really have to work together to come up with like a large scale plan of treating broom by the watershed. And then you covered so much. I don't have too much more to add aside from Kim's herbicide question there and the difference between Scotch and French broom being kind of quintessential. For some reason, a lot of people refer to broom as Scotch broom. And Will, I loved how you started your presentation by pointing out that they're different. Both legumes, but their growth behavior is very different. Scotch broom is nearly impossible to pull. French broom is quite easy to pull. And so that's really important because the front 6-foot French broom plant only has a 4-inch root. Whereas a Scotch broom plant, you will really hurt your back trying to pull a 6-foot Scotch broom plant. So what we do is we recommend cut and paint for Scotch broom, and then we hardly ever recommend an herbicide treatment for French broom since it can be so easily pulled. However, if it's been mowed a bunch of times, then you might have to resort to a chemical. And from somebody who's applied foliar spray, yes, absolutely be conscientious of the surrounding native vegetation. But also, broom is very dangerous to foliar spray for the applicator because it's a tall plant. And if you get wind gusts, you're exposing the applicators doing this work. So I really think we need to save herbicide treatments as a last resort for the environment and the people doing the work. However, I think the cut and paint and systemic chemical for Scotch broom is a really valuable resource. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents on broom. And then if I did have the ability to share the screen, I don't know if I can show a quick video I have of what my team's doing right now. I think the group might enjoy it.
So as long as it's not the 48-minute film that you're starring in.
Yeah, that is a great one too. This one's I think 8 seconds. So, oh, here we go. Share. Share. Okay, I think I
I
got
haven't
it.
watched it yet.
So you just stick everybody here.
Oh yeah. Okay. So can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what my
Yes.
team's doing right now at the headwaters of Mill Creek, where we have a density of broom over 15 acres, so dense you can't actually walk through it. And I just want to show you how quick it comes out.
Oh, it may not stream very well for us.
Oh, oh no. Well, that is
But we
what
can
we're
see.
doing.
You can tell us what, like, just narrate
Oh,
it to
okay.
us.
Okay, well, basically, through manual pulling, we can do a half an acre a day. And when we're doing that, so we do 2 acres a week. And when we do it, we save all of the native plants that are trying to survive in it. The iris, the coffee berry. We found little hedge nettles, tons of ferns. And that's a part of the equation, right? Because once you get the bad guy gone, what's going to come back? So I think that's where I'll end my 2 cents on broom is look out for the good guys as you're going after the bad guys. And
Jason,
just
what would be
thank you
the
again
treatment
for
on
having me.
that? Are you pulling and what are you doing to the biomass?
Oh, thanks, Kim. That's a great point. We are pulling like crazy, and then we don't do anything to treat the pulled material. We just spread it out on the forest floor. Because when you have finite budgets, you're wasting you're wasting dollars if you're piling it, if you're chipping it, if you're dumping it. As long as you get it before it has seeds on it, you just spread it out on the forest floor. It breaks down so quick. All of a sudden, it's just a bunch of twigs. You can hardly even tell it was there. And you just got to do all this before it has seeds on it, right? And I see a lot of people going after it when there's seeds on there and chipping it and just spreading seeds everywhere, and it's a total nightmare. So basically, you got to get to it. And if you pull it and leave it on the ground, you're doing erosion control and it's going to break down so quick you can't even believe it. Save all that disposal money and leave it right there on the site.
Thanks, Jason. True confessions, that we had an open space preserve up by the Sinead Hospital, and we had a volunteer day, kind of, trying to take advantage of a young soccer crew. It's a Spanish-speaking crew, and so I went up there with them, and we were pulling broom, and as we were pulling, I could hear the popping of the seeds. I go, this is horrible. This is definitely defeating the purpose.
You want to get like a giant vacuum and
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Adriana said maybe come out with a vacuum cleaner to get all the seeds that popped.
Yeah, it's disheartening. And what we don't want is for people to give up because giving up isn't an option. We can't
Right.
give up. It's eating up our forests. We can't just
Yeah.
walk away and give up if we want to maintain our habitats, right? It's our land we got to take care of. Came from Europe. Come on, Western civilization. Let's fix the problems we created, right?
Thank you, Jason. Christopher.
Yeah.
Bill, I really appreciate that earlier comment at the beginning. This is just one step in the process of ecological restoration. So we have 74 acres and our 50-acre conservation easement was riddled with Scotch broom. And my land partners have spent over 20 years pulling it. It's definitely not a single event activity. And we have, I call them broom graveyards. We have piled up massive areas from all that work. Now, I didn't hear any of you say anything about, well, I call it shrubs and bordering on trees. It's not cute little things, bushy things that ground. We've had mother broom at 8 to 10 inches in diameter, massive, where we had to use chainsaws just to get down.
Wow.
So once you get those big bushes that are trees, it's even more challenging than just the little cutie ones that come up in the spring. You can pull out of moist soil. But we're still years later, still every spring going out there and checking and pulling. But reasonably under control, but you gotta be dedicated forever.
Yeah, we call that old growth broom. When you find the big grandpas, that's your old growth broom. And then, another factor is you have you buy yourself time between pulls because the plant doesn't produce seed until 2 years of growth. So staggering your pulls by the lay of the land is a really good move because if once you have it at a bunch of different life stages, then it becomes really hard to manage. But if you're doing sweeps, strategic sweeps, we call it hopscotching down the watershed. That's a good
Exactly, completely
technique.
agree with that. And I should say, yeah, I didn't mention that in my talk, but you like that, right? Think strategy first, and that's exactly what you're sharing, and then use the tools that's appropriate. So it might be that those old growth ones, you need to cut that, you need to get at that somehow, right? You need to get in there and maybe just pull, then after that focus, you're pulling on the ones that are flowering and can set seed.
Yeah.
And then when you get to all those resprouts, right, for sometime later, that's where those more fine-tuned, that's where maybe flaming can play a role, or that's where, that's a different level. That's maybe you're getting a kids group to pull or close to the ground and bend over or whatever that is, right? Like pull the big ones with your weed wrench or whatever, and come back for those others. So like those tools, choose from the menu what's appropriate for the strategy that you're doing.
Greg, thank you for joining us. I wondered if you have ever experienced a broom pull before.
Never. The first time I hear about it. Yeah, no, Jason covered a lot, and Will, fantastic presentation.
Hey, Greg, do you want to introduce yourself and who you work with?
Of course. So I'm Greg Sitter. I'm the Senior Manager of Natural Resources at Conservation Cornwall Bay. We are a job training program for young adults 18 to 30 years old. And we do a lot of, fuels management, invasive species removal, and other sort of like climate adaptation activities across Marin County, Sonoma County. And then we do some work in Napa County and Lake County. So Broom, we work on Broom, every year, both in Marin County and Sonoma County. We've implemented different strategies at different locations. Some of them I'm very happy about. Some of them, some of like what Kim described, that working with plants that are already in seed, and having to do that based on agencies asking us to do that. We've done that. What I wanted to share is I feel like with Broom, I see that there's a need for more like overall general public education to happen, more understanding of what is Broom, so that folks can not look at it and be like, oh, look at its pretty flower that's like showing up on my property. I love it. It's yellow and it's pretty. And so that they understand that that's an invasive plant and they can do something about it. But I think the other aspect is like I feel like there's a need for like in Sonoma County, particularly a need for like sort of like a concerted approach and like a pretty heavy-handed approach in my perspective. I kind of see it as like we would need like some folks doing broom patrol all the time to kind of like both address the new infestation so that we can sort of like stop the spread, but also go tackle like the existing infestation that we know about. We worked with like some folks ag and open space on some of the preserves to remove some brooms over the years, and I've seen that it's you can put a dent in that, like the Pollen Creek Preserve that Tim was mentioning is like I've seen the work that our crews have done year after year, and then going back, it's like I see that it's an infestation that was acres is now like very minimal. You still have some plants popping up. You have to go back. You have to pull them, or you have to flame them. I feel like one thing that Jason mentioned that he was working on a project, and when he was sort of like sharing with me his approach, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I've been suggesting other folks. Is like year one pulling, and so there's some sort of disturbance happening. Like Will was saying, is like that's gonna bring some seeds up, but you're removing a lot of the biomass. And then in subsequent years, instead of like adding to the soil disturbance and pulling more, you come with like flaming or other approach, or like even cutting. But with flaming, I see that as like an approach of like being able to address the new sprouts and really reducing the new population without creating more soil disturbance. And so ideally in the long term, it's like you're not gonna have as much of an infestation coming back. That said, it's a marathon. It's like a multi-year, probably decades of work ahead to make sure we can control that and constant monitoring. So I'm excited, that our crews are working on that regularly. I'm excited that there's funding for invasive species removal. There's funding for fuels reduction around roadside, and I feel like the work along the roads is pretty critical as well, because anyone driving there when it's in seeds is like it's just bringing the seeds all over the county. And so I feel like Jason mentioned, like moving away from the mowing and sort of like kind of tackling those roadsides and be like, all right, yeah, we need to do something here because otherwise we'll have it all over the county all the time. It's always going to come back. Like I feel like if we want to do something significant about it, that's what I see as being like an important action. But yeah, it's difficult work. I'm sure anyone that's built Broom, and like it's tedious, and when you do 20, 30, 40 acres of it, it's tough. But I feel like it's also very rewarding. You see, in just a few minutes on a video, or like in one day of work, you can take a before after picture and see having a real impact, and see the difference. Like you can't not see the difference of some of where Broom has been removed and where it wasn't removed. And so I feel like it's also, like I said, it's hard, but also very rewarding. Yeah, I'll guess I'll stop there. It's we do that work every year in Marin County from between January and February. I've been with Conservation Cornell Bay for 5 years, and with Marin County Parks every year we have our crews go back and continue to pull. And so it's a long-term investment, but also I feel like there's no alternative to that to achieve some control of it, and keeping the community safer, because it's also like a big fuels problem. And so it's like not just invasive and taking over native vegetation, but it's also like creating fire hazards all over the place. And so it's, to me, I see it as a pretty critical task to work on, and I'm excited that that's the topic of today.
And Greg, you largely will have contracts with different public organizations. Are you available to work on private land holdings as well? There are a few private landowners on the call, and I wonder if you are able to provide services to them as well.
We are, yeah. We typically looking at like, bigger projects, but we are working, with collective of folks. I guess that's another aspect that I've seen with Broom, that it's sometimes hard as a implementation agency that's working on these projects is that, Broom doesn't know like parcel boundary, right? Like it doesn't know who's the owner here. And so it really takes communities to work together on that. A little bit like, we have the fire safe councils that are working together to achieve fuels reduction work. And it takes sort of like the same work for invasive species where, you kind of want to have, you don't want to leave like, bad infestation at the parcel boundary because, well, the next person doesn't want to do it. And so but yeah, to respond to answer your question, yes, we do work with private landowner on projects as well. And same, Jason who's here too is doing that as well. And so yeah, if anyone's interested or has Broom on their property and they want to figure out a way to tackle it, we're happy to help with that.
Thank you, Greg. Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot. I wondered how you prioritize the work with the group in Sonoma Valley and how successful that has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a couple grant funded, hold on one second. I have dogs in the background that when I started talking decided that was a good time to bark. Anyway, yeah, we've actually had I would say good success in our last. We've had 2 grants funded by the Ag and Open Space Veg Management Grant Program, and those have, I would say, primarily been focused on pulling broom. Overall creating shaded fuel breaks, but the majority of the vegetation in those areas was broom. And we've worked with 2 different community groups, one in the Glen Ellen area. It's a community like just west of Glen Ellen. And we've, thankfully the funds from the Veg Management Grant Program allowed us to do a really good initial push of broom pulling. But that particular community has now taken it upon themselves, and the landowners have felt inspired from actually seeing some progress. I think that's the hardest thing, is that a lot of landowners, especially the ones that I've worked with, like they have a 5, 10, 15 acre property and it's infested with broom. And they're like, I don't know where to start. This feels daunting. And so being able to get a crew in there or get a first push of broom pulling really has helped a lot of the landowners we've worked with feel like they are empowered to continue the work. And one anecdote, and I think Kim was there on a tour that we did with him and a couple other folks earlier this year. We had pulled broom in a big area. The landowner was actually previously pretty hesitant and, unsure of using prescribed fire and just doing a burn pile. But one of the other landowners that was like really gung-ho about pile burning and broom pulling actually went and then helped that landowner burn all the broom that we had pulled. And then that landowner ended up pulling a huge amount just all by himself. And so it's really cool to see that, like, it is a big effort, but once people feel like they have, they know what to do and they know how to pull it and then burn it, it's, you kind of it's nice to see that progress being made. But then I drive around the rest of Sonoma County and I'm like, there's broom everywhere. So as Greg was saying, it feels daunting, and it feels like there just needs to be a task force pulling broom all day, every day, forever, so that we can get the problem under control.
That's a really good point. And I think what I liked about that project particularly was that it was along a ridge line, and that was the ridge line that helped carry the fire into Glen Ellen. And so we start to look at these different strategic points where we try to take advantage of topography. Adriana mentioned the potential operational delineations, the pods around the county, trying to focus on these points where we can start to get ahead of the Broom so that we know if a wildfire comes, firefighters have an idea where the areas have been cleared, where they can do backburns, things like that. So I really appreciate the community participation, the landowners' participation in that particular project.
Yeah, to, end it on a bright note, because it's a very dismal situation. I looked at Broom as the cancer of the land, right? And we all try to do what we can, but then it really will take a village, right? And we can make a difference with our two hands. And just one day you can look back and hey, I stewarded that piece of land right there myself. And the more hands we get, we can beat it. But it's almost going to take like a cultural shift to get back to essential land stewardship to take care of our watersheds together, right? But yeah, I should just end it there. But I also do want to talk about funding, because funding, you got to be prepared. It's not just that one and done sweep. So, once you go in and do that initial treatment, just make sure you secured enough funding for a follow-up treatment, whether it's flaming or herbicide or repolling, to get that success, because we can't keep spinning these wheels. We got to get ahead of it.
All right, thank you, Jason, for closing us out on that topic. We have a few, I'm sorry, Christopher, you have a little more comment?
A lot of us have been using the word together. We got to do this together. So I'm reminded of a great program that Goldridge had called Collaborative Grazing, where you said you would give grants if neighbors work together. And because I have the situation of broom growing around my own parcel and having to physically jump over the fence onto my neighbor's property to get at their broom, again, I wonder if Goldridge could do a grant process that's not just treating individual parcels, but says as one of the conditions you have to work with one or two neighbors across boundaries on dealing with broom. Because the funding stream can support something beyond individual response to collective response, as we keep using collaborative collective response.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. That's a great idea. Do we have a few more minutes to keep talking, or do we need to close out? Oh, okay, because I had some questions about that too. And I don't know, I'm thinking about Broom as like such a phase, like you have to keep working in phases, right? Especially if you have a crazy infestation like what you just showed, Jason, or even a roadside like Bohemian Highway where it's really thick. We know that when we do the removal, we're going to cause disturbance. There's going to be probably like a reinvigoration of that seed bank if it was there before. So what do you do that second year? You go back in, you continue to either pull or graze or flame. You have to do some kind of follow-up treatment. And then what? And I guess I'm like wanting to play it all the way out. Like, is shade the answer? Do we plant a bunch of shade plants and then weed around them as they become mature? And not every site's the same, so shade's not always, that's maybe not what we're going for there. But I guess I'm just trying to think, like, is there a way to, kind of like a program and set ourselves on, like, okay, we do this first, then we do the maintenance, then we do the long-term prevention of incorporating shade or those competing plants like you were talking about, Will, and I'd love to hear more about the kinds of plants that you might suggest could be a good competitor. But yeah, I guess that's just kind of my general question and how people are feeling about their like long-term management approach.
Well, I like Jason's suggestion that in the funding, you provide funding for year 1 and year 2, just to get the process supported. We have too many just one-time deal and that's it. And then the landowner is left dealing with a daunting task the next year. But maybe have a little bit more year 1, a little less funding year 2, maybe a little less year 3. You provide some kind of transition, because from what you're all saying, management is time intensive in the moment and over time.
I also like what Jason said about stewardship and that idea of getting back to paying attention to places over time. And so it's a whole challenge of funding and energy and all that, but this idea that, okay, I've treated a project here, I'm gonna go back there, every February and just see how's it looking. Oh, there's a couple more broom sprouts. And that little bit of effort, 5 years after your project, it saves a whole lot of effort 10 years after. Right? It's like that. So if it's just we work this into when we're out in the landscape, we see a couple of brooms in fall. I bring this up, the Monterey Redwoods extension. There's been all this, or Monterey Redwoods, the core property. There's been this great burning up on the ridge top, and that's released some broom. And this is a place with a lot of public visitors, scenic viewpoint, and it's really easy when I ride my bike there. I pull the broom at the trail junction, right? It's if every visitor was doing that ethic of stewardship, that's taking from a park without a permit, but there's there's that
granted.
Yeah, but there's that ethic, that stewardship ethic. I think Jason, you hinted at that, but there's a way to do that as follow-up if more landowners are doing it, and not what do you do about road shoulders? That's a different, what's the end game of that? I mean, those are going to be mowed whether there's broom there or not. That's a tougher one to crack, but you can work with public infrastructure on the timing of that mowing. You can think about establishing robust perennial native communities that can compete with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because, well, you pointed out the nitrogen fixing role of legumes. Before we had broom, we had ceanothus, another major nitrogen fixing shrub that came in post fire, did its succession to Adriana's point, eventually phased out through forest succession and shading, and that was part of our natural ecosystem function. Now we've thrown an exotic plant in the mix that's completely dominating and throwing everything out of whack. So, yeah, building in these regimes of treatment. And Will, I'm so with you on if we just took care of the places we recreate in, that would be a great starting point, right? Because we do the same trails, the same bike rides. We notice, hey, oh, there's broom popping up here where it wasn't before. Well, I'll just get out and pull this. And that sort of mentality would make a difference. And one thing on the roadside stuff, which is really I think the vectors of how this stuff is spreading and overtaking, is a practice they do for roadside maintenance on Mount Tam, which I thought was really valuable. Before a crew starts work on any roadside maintenance project, they gauge the vegetation there before they start work. And they take notes. Oh, we have 60% cover of French broom. Then when they go back the following season, they're able to tell if it's getting worse or better. Or they'll have sites where there wasn't broom and now equipment is bringing it in. So a way of tracking and monitoring what's going on and how effective the work is should be kind of built in to a large scale broom effort, um, to track what's going on. And we have, all sorts of people doing all sorts of things, but we don't have enough data to back up and support the best practices here, so that there's also a lot of need for research and collecting field data on all these different treatments to really see what's most effective. Like Lauren, when I was back with SEC with post fire nuns, the habitat corridor there in Sonoma Creek, it came up so thick. And I remember we had the grant, and we were like, okay, should we even take this on? Because it's everywhere. And I'm like, well, what's the option? We walk away? Can't walk away. So we went back, we had every volunteer group, every MLK day, every Earth Day, and we pulled it all. And that wall of broom is gone. And the source population was upstream, Wolf Creek. So now it's great. You guys have picked up the torch and started to address the source, right? And that's that sort of watershed approach we're going to have to do if we're going to beat it.
Thanks for that, Jason.
All right.
I was also just gonna, I don't know if Minona's still here, but it would be awesome if I feel like regional parks is a little bit more nimble than, other state agencies, but it would be so cool to see some sort of broom task force, show photos to people when they're out hiking. And if you see these little plants, pull them. So I feel like that could, piggybacking on what Jason was saying, that would be really a cool effort, because I try to pull it when I see it hiking, but I know that's not on everybody's radar.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to do something like that. We just have kind of limited capacity, but we'd love to, do some partnership if there is like a broom removal, um, you know, countywide effort or coalition effort, regional effort. We'd be happy to amplify that and push it out to people when they come to our parks. We do specific events in different parks with volunteers around broom removal, but just like a ongoing campaign, we haven't tried that yet, but happy to partner with others and if you wanted to help with getting the message, developing the message and getting it out, we'd be happy to host that at regional parks. And, we try and do what we can. I think we've worked with all of you on broom removal projects, but kind of a ongoing effort, which I agree is what is needed, but it's just hard to get there.
Great. Thank you, Winona. I just want to close out today with a couple of announcements about some events coming up tomorrow. They're going to be doing some pile burning up at Rancho Mark West. You're welcome to observe that, I guess. I'm not sure, but it's Land Pass is directing it.
So when they have it on their website, it might be too late to sign up now, but they have recurring events like that. Sign up to be a part of.
Okay, great. Yeah. And then also the Learn and Burn days are back at Pepperwood. Thank you, Kai and Devin, for hosting that. That is essentially an opportunity to learn and participate on how to do burns, what other treatments are associated with burns on a property where there is lots of pile burning, broadcast burning. And so those workshops happen every third Thursday and every second Saturday. And Kai, are you asking for signups before those?
And does ask for signups so we know the numbers we're going to have. Yeah, so there'll be if you go to our website, you'll find an event and a registration there.
It's a great opportunity to learn about fire ecology, the restoration activities that are going on the property, and you'll get an opportunity to participate as an active practitioner of prescribed burning. And then also at Pepperwood, there's a pile burning workshop on December 14th. And then most importantly, the December 18th Forest Conservation Working Group Holiday Gathering. This is an annual tradition that started back in 20 years ago when I put my footprint on this organization. And it's a long-standing tradition. We meet at La Rosa. We go from about 5:30 till I think they close at 2 in the morning. I'm not sure. So it is a 5:30 to 7:30 event. I usually buy the first pitcher of margaritas, so that's your incentive program right now. But we welcome you guys to join us in person. It's a really nice event to get a chance to see each other in 3D and get a chance to share some libations, some good food, and have fun together. All right, so please join us on December 18th for that. We didn't decide whether we will actually have a meeting that day.
No, we don't officially know.
Yeah, okay, typically, we don't do a meeting in the morning because it will be more of an incentive for folks to show up in the afternoon and the evening. So is that the way we want to go, or do we want to follow?
We were maybe talking about doing like a 4 p.m. meeting so that we could
Okay.
people could be here. We could still do some stuff and then go shortly after.
All right.
We'll figure it out.
TBD, we'll get back to you on whether we will host an event beforehand. So to meander there at 5:30. So thank you, folks. Thank you to Will, to Kai. Thank you, Jason and Greg, for chipping in, and all of the other folks who participated in this conversation. We really appreciate you guys showing up, and we will see you on December 18th.
Cool.
All right. See you, folks.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.